Zadal Neely, welcome to another episode of Coffee in the Clouds. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so thrilled to be with you today.
Oh, well, not as much as me. So let me just tell you, I ask everybody this. Who are you and what do you do?
Who am I? What a question, because it could be very existential. I am on the faculty of the Harvard Business School. And for the last 2 decades, I've looked at the intersection of work, technology, and organizations, and how our workplaces are shaped and reshaped by globalization, by digitization, and remote work, which is the latest revolution that's completely having us rethink how we work together. At the Harvard Business School, I also teach MBAs and executives and have my own online course as well. That's Asynchronous. That's who I am.
So you don't just wake up one day and say, "Okay, I am now going to be the leading authority on remote work on the planet," right? So how does it come to be? How did you go into this discipline?
You certainly don't. You certainly don't. So I actually started to explore this topic some 20 years ago because I was convinced as I was going into academia after spending some 10 years working in all sorts of client facing jobs in consulting and technology and other places. I was fully convinced that technology was going to change how we worked. So I didn't want to look at just teams, which is really important. I wanted to look at virtual teams. I wanted to look at digitally enabled global collaboration. I wanted to look at ways in which technology has us rethinking how we serve customers. So I somehow always believed that technology would be at the center of our professions. I just never in my wildest dreams. And it pains me. It pains me that the prevalence of this and the ubiquity of this has come through a global pandemic that has forced us all into becoming remote workers and leaders. But I've always believed that this would be a pretty important work arrangement.
So let me take you back at least 1 month before COVID became the household word that it is, right? What were you doing pre-COVID? What was your world like pre? Because we're going to talk about the pandemic, okay? But what was the world like as in your domain, in your area of expertise 12, 15 months ago?
Wow. No one's asked me that question that way, and it's an important question because I was actually working on a book with my co-author Paul Leonardi, someone that I write with a lot, on the topic called the digital mindset. What we really need to know in the age of AI, data, and algorithms. So I was steeped in the work of the digital revolution that I feel is right behind the remote work revolution. And in fact, the remote work revolution is going to prepare us for this. So I was immersed in that work, talking to scores of people and organizations and determining what are the key factors that we need to truly understand, no matter where we sit in an organization, around becoming a digital first, digital mindset individual and organization. I was immersed in that. I was also traveling the world, my last trip being, I think, February 20th or so, 2020. I think I was in Portugal. Before that, I was in Saudi Arabia, Doha, Qatar, and other places where I spoke a lot and taught a lot on the topics of global work, on the topics of digital transformation. That's what I was thinking about before I accelerated this work that was well underway, the remote work piece.
So, because I remember back, let's say 12, 15, and the big topics were AI, right? About how AI was going to take everybody's job. That was one, right? Or climate change, how climate change was going to, right? Um, but then here comes COVID, right? And it just feels like 10 years worth of stuff was crammed into 10 months. I mean, that's how I personally feel, but were these things coming anyway, and we just had to do it faster? Or did COVID and the pandemic shift things where this is actually new territory and not just rushed?
The way I think about it is that this is not new. Remote work is not new. Virtuality is not new. Global work and global distribution of collaboration is not new, but it only affected about 30% of a given organization, where those who are virtual interacted and worked through enabling technologies. Same thing with when you have boundaries or borders that are crossed in work, in commerce, et cetera. But what I think COVID has done is that it has accelerated the virtualization of work across many companies, many industries, and each of us have been thrust into this particular work arrangement. And the other thing that I found is that whether you're new to remote work or someone who's a veteran, have been doing this for a very long time, our routines, our norms, our habits have been completely upended because everyone else is doing this remote work as well. So the way we communicate, the way we engage, the way we perform our work, whether we're new to remote work or virtual work or not, has shifted. And I agree with you 100%. I think COVID and this pandemic has accelerated technological advancements in the virtualization of work by 10 to 20 years. It really has, which is why all of the rumblings of AI and other things that we've been talking about, it's always been kind of in the ether, right? Is going to come full force. It's right behind this particular way of working because many companies have leapfrogged into this new realm and thinking about digitally enabled work differently.
So I was born in 1960. So I remember hearing about telemedicine ever since the New York World's Fair. Okay, like, right. It was like, oh, and it's like, well, it happened now, right? But I don't know if COVID didn't happen, was telemedicine even going to be a thing right now, or was it going to be still dragging on?
I don't think it would have been a thing to the extent that it's become a thing. Listen, what COVID did because of its contagiousness is that it drove all of us and our work and professions into these remote settings, and telemedicine became so much more accepted. One of my biggest worries has been and continues to be a bit is that we privilege in-person work, in-person service, as if that is the only thing that could be trusted. But COVID has forced us to think differently, including telemedicine.
So I'm in my home office right now. Right behind me is a picture of my 11 Times Square office that I don't go to anymore. Right. You know, distance education. Well, now it's just education. Right. Telemedicine, it's just medicine. Right. E-commerce, it's just commerce now. Right. Because I mean, it feels like a year ago we would say, I bought it online. Well, now you just say I bought it. You don't say online, right? So I'm looking at all these paradigm shifts, but why are some people fully embracing remote work? Like, we're not going to renew the lease. We're all going to work from home, versus no, we're going back to the office. I mean, okay, go back, hybrid, work from home, right? What's the right answer? How do you coach or how do you counsel a company, a corporation, an entity of any size? Like, how do they decide what do we do? what are we going to do?
It's a very serious and consequential question for organizations. What do we do? Because at stake for many leaders and organization is the culture that they want to preserve, because how we work manifests in our culture, and we've created cultures of learning and organizations and work that we believe fit our particular values that we want to share with the world. And now we need to think differently about work arrangements. Here's my feeling on this, Tom, and feelings on this may not be the right way to say this because I am an evidence-based scholar. So the data guides my understanding of the world. A vast majority of employees across organizations and industries who've had a taste of remote work, whose eyes are now fully capable of seeing the virtues of it, are asking to retain some form of virtual or remote work into their professional arrangements to the tune of 81 to 87%. Of that number, some 30% want to do it full time. I want to retain this full time. On the other hand, employers, some 68 to 70%, the latest data that I've looked at, want people back in the office. That is a tension that must be resolved because if you force people back into the office, what conversations are going to take place around the water cooler? We cannot unsee, unfeel, and not experience virtual work, including historical arguments that if we don't see people, they won't perform. Productivity relies on in-person work. All of those have been debunked in the last year because most organizations also will tell you that their productivity has gone up in the last year. If they haven't gone up, it's because some of the conditions for virtual productivity haven't been met in their organizations, or the type of work that they did just couldn't exist in this particular economy.
So the big decision makers, the people that are actually going to decide, like, are they going by emotion or are they making decisions based on data?
I think they're making decisions based on what they understand to be their culture, and they want to preserve it. And I understand that completely. But there's also fears, lots and lots of fears. How are we going to lead and manage a distributed workforce? We don't have that competency. How do we convey our culture? We don't have that competency virtually. How do we onboard new people? We don't have that competency. How do we even think about human resources, compensation when people start to move out of the locale and labor costs begin to vary depending on where they live and costs of living? It is complicated. But if we don't embrace this, many people have said and continue to say, if I cannot have some form of virtual work in my professional arrangement, I will leave that organization. I think it's going to become a very important and serious competitive advantage for those who are willing to go at it. I also think that if your industry and your industry leaders are embracing this change and moving into hybrid formats, how could you not?
Is there some kind of a crossover or like a blend where, you have remote work, but now we also have remote education? And then there's some negativity there because I get it that, if you have a young child and, they're studying from home, right? That's not so easy, right? But if you're a fully formed adult, and you're working, right? Do you think that remote work is getting a little bit of a bad, rap because we're thinking about kids not getting educated? I mean, do you think there's a little bit of a bleed over on that?
I'm laughing because what is a fully formed adult? After all, does it ever get
It's
formed?
one of my catchphrases. It's like, we're only hiring fully formed adults. We're only hiring fully formed.
Listen, us fully formed adults And I'd love to hear where you're from as well, because adults, I don't know. Listen, we have been thrust into the most radical of changes in our lifetime. This is the first true global pandemic that most of us alive today have ever experienced. So the radical changes, of course, are also affecting education and learning and industries, et cetera. And so why are we worried? We're worried because as leaders and managers, we're losing control. Listen, if we look at old sociological pieces by Foucault and others, what do we know about managers? They crave hierarchy and control. And remote work, on the other hand, says individuals or fully formed adults can have full self-control and be part of a thriving group or team. Autonomy is something that individuals crave and want. This is why the job satisfaction among remote workers is typically higher than those who are not in remote work. The term in these old studies is telecommuting versus those who don't telecommute, right? That's kind of the old term around this, going back to your usage of telemedicine. But the reality is job satisfaction is typically higher because of the autonomy that we preserve, the ability to use time in a way that fits our world, flex time, while at the same time making sure that we have overlapping work patterns with those in our teams, in our groups. The reality, here's my true belief. Work has changed. Organizations have changed, even when we go back into our physical spaces. Because of this pandemic, we're going to see signs everywhere. We're going to walk one way as opposed to two ways, kind of like the grocery stores. The social distancing will be real. We're not going to jam people in conference rooms so that 6 of us are going to be in this small space meeting. That's not going to be that way anymore. Some of us will be in the room, social distance. Some of us will be dialing in through some video conferencing, whether we're in the building or in our homes. Work has changed. It's changed. Let's embrace it and take the best parts of this and create a modern organization. This is my perspective.
You know, I tried to boil it down to like 6 words for my people. And the first 3 words were do your job. There's the first 3. Okay. The next word was collaborate. So there's 4. And then the last 2 words were communicate often. Ooh. So those are my 6 words. Just I said, now obviously that's not enough, but I feel that if people will embrace that just for what it is, again, assuming fully formed adult, right? So what do you see as the mistakes that these, well-intentioned people are going to make or have been making, where it's like, it could have been better. Here's what you could have done to make it better. What are some of the mistakes that we can avoid?
Some of the mistakes that we can avoid is fall into the traps that include being out of sight, out of mind, out of sync, and out of touch. Individuals and leaders need to work really hard to get fully aligned, because we can move out of alignment quite easily. This is why the first chapter of my book is called Relaunch for Success. And relaunching is we're constantly working on our alignment, and there's a set of things that you can do in order to get there. The other things to keep in mind is that we overuse certain technologies, which is killing us. Tech exhaustion is real. And if you adopt some of the systematic ways of thinking about technologies such that we are using them for work and not just to communicate, tech exhaustion will be eradicated from our lives. We over-index on certain technologies and their ways and dimensions and frameworks to eliminate that, because the cognitive load that people are experiencing is real, it's severe, and should not exist if we do this the right way.
Mhm.
The third thing that I'll mention here is the work and non-work lives are blurring because we're not setting boundaries, and as leaders, we're not demonstrating through our own behaviors how to set boundaries. So we're falling prey to what's called hyper productivity. Hyper productivity is that we are putting in so many hours. The commute times that we save, we're working.
Yeah.
The blurring is such that it's affecting our ability to renew, refresh, and kind of well-being is becoming a problem. So wherever you see people getting burned out, stressed out, and anxious, it's because they're working too much and achieving a lot more, hyper productivity, but that's not sustainable. These are individual and leaders' responsibilities to change so that we can make this sustainable.
What about synchronous versus asynchronous?
Synchronous versus asynchronous is incredibly important. It's part of the gift that you get when you are a virtual or remote person, which means that, and by the way, this whole thing is covered in chapter 4 in my book. And I mention this because I think at the end of the day, you have productivity, you have trust, culture, cohesion, all of those things, and how you use synchronous and asynchronous communication tools enables you to achieve the things that I just mentioned, the work and the relationship among people. And so there are times when synchronous communication is very important, where you need discussion, you need real time back and forth. You need to be able to see what scholars call context, place, variety of expressions. If you have great news, be in some kind of visual synchronous communication mode. If you have bad news, you want to do the same. But if you have ordinary information that you could just send through email or some kind of enterprise-wide social media, you should do that as well. Asynchronous communication is crucial to integrate into our work because it's when we need to process complex information, for example. It's better to send it asynchronously so people can spend time figuring out and absorbing, assimilating that information, as opposed to jumping on a video conferencing on those things. Asynchronous communication is also very important when you have simple coordination to do. Why are we getting on video conferencing constantly and we're having them for way too long? Synchronous. This meetings have gotten longer and longer. So to find the actual goals and tasks and match them to synchronous versus asynchronous is an important heuristic to develop.
You know, things like chief learning officer became a thing, right? Within the last couple of years. Do you think there's going to be such a thing as a chief remote officer or something like that? Do you think that's going to happen?
Yes.
Or did it already happen?
It is. It's already happening. Chief remote officer into the C-suite, which elevates this idea that we are rethinking our entire workforce and how do we make sure that we have the right systems, processes, and structures in place to make it all work, particularly if you are a large organization or you have a very large audience, like a Twitter. They have someone who is working in this capacity. The title may be slightly different. So you want someone to be thinking about the workforce. You want someone to be thinking about real estate holdings, because whatever decision we make will have bearing on our real estate and creating spaces like hoteling spaces, possibly. Right. The other thing that we need to think about is what is the design of our modern spaces. All of these things require true consideration and input, in addition to getting a clear sense of what our workforce wants. You have to survey people anonymously, not asking them to put their name, so you can get true and real, honest answers, and then you look at what work needs to be done, what networks need to be built, and how do we make all of this happen, including building capacity and competency across the firm.
So it seems like every school on the planet now has a certificate program, like everybody. Okay. Is that an offshoot of the pandemic, or was that also something that was coming anyway, but COVID just said, well, this is all we got now, so we're going with this.
Man, in the last 12 months, the proliferation of learning, teaching, certificate programs has been dizzying.
Mm.
So those who didn't even participate in kind of this learning business are entering it now much more forcefully, like The Economist, like IDEO with design thinking and other things, because the barrier to entry is low and it's easier to be able to reach people at scale by
Right.
doing this. And of course, the idea of a certificate is to show accomplishment and to prove learning. So COVID has absolutely accelerated the rise of online learning, synchronous, asynchronous, some blended programs, but it's also accentuating or amplifying the era of continuous learning. We've entered, you remember I talked about this digital revolution that's kind of right behind us.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an era of continuous learning. We all need to learn a little something every day, is what people who are in the digital game will tell you, because things change, information change, and we need to learn on a regular basis. And many companies have built it into their actual system so that individuals become self-directed learners and continue to grow. This is the era we're in, continuous learning.
So, what is your personal prediction about the future of education? Will we be going back to physical campuses again? Is it going to never? Are we never going back to physical campuses again? I mean, I was promoting Harvard HBX many years ago when it first came out. I was like, this is amazing. This is amazing. This is amazing. I mean, I could get a degree from Harvard and never go to Massachusetts. I go, this is amazing. You know? So what do you think is, because we can't all be right? I mean, you can't have a campus environment and a virtual environment at scale, or can you? What do you think?
I think we will always have on-campus experiences, but I also think that we will have remote online experiences. I think it's going to be, we talk about work and hybrid workplaces.
Right.
I would like to think that we are going to do more of the blended learning model, when in fact you will have opportunities to do some Harvard Business School online. That's what it's called, by the way. It's been renamed HBSO. Harvard Business School online courses that are fantastic. Harvard X courses, fantastic as well. My course, Remote Work Revolution for Everyone, is on the Harvard X platform, which is also, by the way, it's free. And only if you want a certificate do you pay some negligible nominal price. But I think it's going to be blended. So you might see faculty live, and then you might learn something on your own, and then you'll see them live again. Modular, blended, using on campus, off campus, video, non-video type of learning environment. And that allows us to touch more people.
Right. So we have a brand new administration, and we're trying to build back better. If you got the phone call from the White House that said, we need you to come help us, okay, what would be on your short list? How would you be advising a new administration as to what to do to maximize, building back better, not recovery, right? We want to be better. We want to make this into a positive. What would be some of the things you'd be telling, the new administration?
You're killing me. You're asking all sorts of questions I never get asked. So like my head is like exploding. No, listen, if I had the opportunity to convey what's important today, I would talk about making sure that the US is a digitally advanced nation, that our education systems are equitable, and we are fighting the digital divide that is forming. We cannot be a nation with the haves and have-nots when these are becoming fundamentally important content areas for our children, for our high schoolers and fully formed adults. We need to bring this very much into our consciousness throughout the economy as well. If you think about what Europe is doing, and the EU commissioner on this role, his name is Thierry Breton, someone I admire quite deeply. And he is kind of the digital technical czar of Europe. And he is working on what it looks like to ensure that Europe is data-driven, that Europe has the right cyber safety security measures, and that Europe is using artificial intelligence to uplift that whole region. And you have people like Vittorio Colao, who is now the Minister of Technological Innovation in Italy, who has also endorsed my book, by the way. He's a fantastic former CEO of Vodafone with a budget of $200 billion in order to elevate the entire country of Italy digitally. We need to do the same in the US so that we can compete not only in our own economy, but also externally as well. We need to understand data. We need to understand technology. We need to understand cybersecurity. We need to understand data privacy. And we need to understand all the biases that are driven into our algorithms so that we can all engage in this new economy. This is what I mean. The digital revolution is behind us. Other countries are doing it. We need to do it too.
So you would think that the United States would be the leader because of technology and our history with innovation, et cetera. So what's prevented it up to this point? What do you think is the biggest stumbling block that would need to be, why are we not leading the world in this? Is it why?
This is definitely completely out of my pay grade. So I cannot assess for us where we are, where we need to be. What I can say is that we do have some of the most advanced technology companies in the world. We have such amazing leaders and assets that we can use to ensure that we're spreading the knowledge and building an economy and communities all across the nation that could participate in this digital revolution. So I can't talk about why not, but I can talk about what we can possibly do because we have all of the advances right here in the US.
So let's talk about the book for a second. Okay, let's talk about the book. If this was Oprah's book club, and Oprah said to you, okay, who is this book written for? Who is the target that we say, you got to read this book? This book is for you. Who's the target audience for the book?
The target audience for the book is everyone. It's every individual, it's every manager, it's every learner, it's every teacher, it's everyone who has to work with others through digitally enabled technologies. The book is actually structured to provide guidelines on some of the key topics that you need to understand. It's distilled if you're participating in a virtual environment. So I use case examples, stories, frameworks, and a ton of practical guides in order to help people integrate the learning into their work. This book, in my mind, can be the blueprint for connection and trust and advancement productively in a remote environment. So if someone is remote or collaborating with someone who is remote or leading someone who is remote, teaching others who are remote, you want to read this book. You want to read this book.
Sticking with the Oprah thing for a second, what's the question that a real pro like Oprah would have asked that I did not ask? So, we're going to wrap soon. So here's your chance to ask and answer your own question. What was I supposed to ask that I didn't ask?
Well, let me begin by saying your questions were magnificent. So I have to dig deep to pose the question that you haven't and answer it. What I would say is, how do we combat the fears that we have for a post-pandemic future of work? We combat them by embracing the fact that the world has forever changed. To try to return to a pre-pandemic world means that we have not accepted the fact that our norms of operating, our habits and routines, our culture, corporate organization cultures have actually died with COVID. And we have been operating in completely different ways for the last 12 months. And that says our pre-pandemic world is no more. We have to construct the new world, and we should do it from a position of knowledge and insight and opportunity versus fear, control, and loss.
Wow. Oprah would be proud. That is good. Well, listen, I could talk to you all day.
Same here.
But and I got a little surprise. I got a little surprise for you. Okay, you didn't know this, but we are actually going to gift your book to our members. So we're going to have links, and I am going to be reimbursing them for the purchase of the book.
I love it.
It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing
to
do.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing that.
We're trying to pay it forward. This is fantastic. Will you agree to come back and meet with us again, maybe in 6 months or so, or 12 months, just to do, like, how did we do?
Oh yeah.
Post pandemic, how does the world, the great reset, that we're going through?
I would love to. I would love to. That would be really great.
Very, very cool. Vidal Neely, this was another session of Coffee in the Clouds. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.